Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Ottawa Experts. My name is Moni Dujeji. And on tonight's show, we are going to explore the topic of building a culture of peace. And I have the rare and unique privilege this evening of having in the studio two individuals that are considered the wise elders of the peace movement, of many peace initiatives here in the city. And with their over 70 years of combined experience in this field, they have a reflection or two to share with you all tonight. I'm very pleased to have with me tonight Bill Venezia and Kuzma Tarasov. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Bill is a former Canadian diplomat who served in the UK and in Germany. He's the author of 6 books and papers on politics, science, and the arts. He holds a doctorate in public policy from the University of Manchester in the UK and studied international relations at the University of Carleton under the Nobel laureate Honorable Lester B. Pearson. He's a co-founder of the Canadian Department of Peace and initiative and the Ottawa Peace Festival, which is now entering its 10th year. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you.
And Kuzma Tarasov received his Master's of Anthropology from UBC and for 16 years worked in the provincial and federal governments as an anthropologist and ethnographer. He's a world-renowned expert on the Doukhobors and is a photographer with over 12 books published dealing with peace, the Doukhobors, and with Native Indians. He has been a peace activist for 60 years and is the official writer and photographer of all 10 Ottawa Peace Festivals. He was born in Saskatchewan to a Doukhobor family that emigrated from Russia to Canada. Welcome again, and it's a real pleasure and a treat to have you both here in the studio with me. Now, why don't I start with you, Bill? Tell me, what is it that got a diplomat interested in building a culture of peace? What's your story? Can you tell me how you started that journey?
I was born in India.
Okay.
In 1965, migrated to Canada.
Yes.
So that's almost more than 50 years. And the urge for peace began somewhere in 1990s when I was posted in London, and nothing to do with the politics,
Yeah.
but it was just personal inner urge actually to do something about peace. And it was around that time, at the end of the millennium, convergence of personal and public things were happening. Personally, I had become interested in the values.
Yeah.
And I said, how to live by these certain values. And the value of nonviolence was something which became very dear to me for the first time. And the second thing was that at the turn, around the 1990s, things were happening around the world in terms of technology. We were in this new world, new era, where there was a communication revolution was going on.
This is true.
And then there was a revolution in life sciences, genomics.
Genomics?
Genomics.
What is genomics? I've never heard that expression.
That's something to do with the genes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so gene mapping.
Okay,
And the
yes.
discoveries were in both the things.
Yes.
The revolution in communication and in genomes. It brought us together. It shows that it reduced the distance in the humanity. You know, just we are not separate, but we are together. 99% of our genomes are common.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that little fact.
Despite our, genders, races, religions, but there's so much commonality.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Oh, interesting.
And then viewing the Earth from the globe, because by that time we had gone to the moon, traveled to Mars, discovery of galaxies. It's just you're wondering what these differences, these labels about nations and religions and identities. What was our primary identity? And that's where this all started. And then around that time, 1999, United Nations was discussing about culture of peace. That's the first time I came across the term culture of peace, because there was a declaration in 1999 by United Nations and UNESCO saying that the next decade or first decade of the millennium will be decade of the culture of peace and prevention of violence against women and children.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's what got me going. That's the kind of a
Yeah.
long story, just put in few words there.
Yeah, but a couple of pieces that kind of came together for you really to get you focused on this idea of building a culture of peace. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means in a second. But Kuzma, tell me about you and your Doukhobor background as well, and how you became involved as a peace activist.
Well, I've been in a very supportive community. I really got my pacifism and my peace from the breast of my mother, because she was really illiterate, but she had a heart of gold. And she taught me that it was wrong to kill another human being, because our ancestors said there is a spirit of God and love in every person.
Yes.
And therefore you have to be peaceful. And it was, my ancestors, they burnt their guns in 1895, 7,000 of them. This was in Tsarist Russia.
Yeah, I don't think people remember that story from history. Yeah, it's true.
And
the
way back
Doukhobors.
in
Yes.
1895.
Yeah.
And so I was brought up in this atmosphere, and at one time, as I was taking my university studies in Saskatchewan, one of the elders said, well, why don't you create a journal? So I started the Inquirer, a monthly publication as I was studying. And this led me to get to know people from around the world, Gandhian, Tolstoyans, the Mennonites and Quakers. And in fact, I had a column called Creating a World Without War. And you know, this sort of theme has continued throughout my life. And as we continued, I've participated in many different kinds of peace festivals, manifestations. Anthropology has given me the tools of stepping into the shoes of another person and getting to know the stranger. Also, I've taken a course in neuro-linguistic programming, NLP,
Yes.
and that gave me tools in doing rapport with people, matching postures and that sort of thing.
So NLP, for those who don't know, it stands for neuro-linguistic programming, and it is a method of words that you say, or is it a mirroring, essentially,
Everything,
of all of that?
including your actions there.
Okay.
And then when I came to Ottawa back in '69, I got to participate in many, well, peace events, and got to meet many good people. Some of them Order of Canada type.
Yes.
And then I met Bill and started the Peace Festival, and I became the photographer and writer. And earlier in that time, I went to Hawaii and met one of the mentors of the non-killing theory, Glenn D. Page. He said that, you know, non-killing is possible because 95% of the world population does not kill.
Good
Therefore,
point.
5% only is involved.
Right.
And therefore, it's possible. So I was quite inspired. I mean, in addition to Lev Tolstoy, who said it's the spirit of God within every individual that's important, and he influenced Gandhi, and Gandhi influenced Martin Luther King.
Yes.
So all of these things are connected.
Yes. So it's interesting for you, it came from, as you say, from the mother's breast. While you were obviously just a toddler, the idea that violence is just not something that is acceptable, that and the whole culture that you grew up in supports this idea of just not killing. And whereas for you, it just kind of seemed to come slowly as different events in your life started to come together. Now, I'd like to ask each of you a very big question, which is, what is peace to you? What does that mean to you? It's probably the biggest question, the most loaded question anyone can ask you. So what does that mean to you? What is peace to you?
Well, it's a very fuzzy concept because it's used by everyone, especially politicians.
Yeah.
It's also in churches and places of worship, and then we all have our own definition. Peace, some people would say, you just get into meditation and yoga, and that's peace.
Yeah.
And then there are people, who would throw bombs in the name of peace.
True.
So it's a very big spectrum. So that's where one has to be very cautious in how one uses that term. Hitler, he used said he was doing colonization of Europe for peace. Stalin said the same thing. He was doing Soviet Union for world peace.
Yes.
And Bush with the Iraq war, that was all for peace. So whenever now the topic of that peace comes, I'm always thinking about what kind of a peace are we talking about. And in my case, I'm evolving in it. And we all evolve in it, actually. For me, started with the same thing, like most of us, from zero to peace and meditation and peace. And then I went to non-violence. And non-violence, ahimsa, means non-injury in thought, words, and deeds.
So ahimsa is a word that comes from
It's
a Sanskrit
yeah.
term that means
non-injury
non-injury.
in thought, words, and deeds.
Okay.
Again, it's a relational, so it comes from person, it goes out.
Yes.
But still, it wasn't very satisfying. There was this ambiguity, because what is that bigger thing where we get into public policy, and we are still talking about peace, but it doesn't mean any of that.
Yes.
We are still injuring people in thought, words, and deeds, and using those words. So that's where, as Kuzma was saying, the word non-killing became very useful to me also.
Yes.
And I started saying, I'm interested in non-killing peace, the peace in which there's no killing.
Okay.
Or
It seems like a subtle distinction, because
That's a big
you
challenge, actually,
because you
yeah.
think peace and you think automatically, well, of course that means not killing, but you're right, by your definitions and how the term has been used historically, yeah, it's easy to manipulate it, I guess.
and so, in fact, what happens to me now, the definition of peace is no more killing.
Okay.
So when the killing stops, peace automatically comes.
Okay.
That's a prerequisite. If violence stops, the peace starts. Now we are talking about the peace in a very
Yes.
global sense here.
Of course.
Beyond personal peace.
Interesting, very good. And how about you, Kuzma?
Yes, peace to me is harmony in life. It's a change in our language from war to peace, from actually from killing to non-killing. It's important.
Yeah.
We have to change our language in order to be able to communicate with people. And that stranger is not really a stranger, it's a friend in the making.
Yes.
So this is something that I feel peace is very important. And so when people say that, you have to go to war or something, I say, well, you don't really. There are alternatives
Yes.
to this. And therefore, harmony, the way to give any future hope to our children and grandchildren is to have a non-killing peace, because otherwise we'll have no world to live in.
Fair enough, fair enough. Well, so then what would be the components then of a culture of peace? What to you then, what constitutes a culture of peace? What does that look like to you? Because you said the culture of peace is something that has come as a term coined by the United Nations, that this is where the focus was going to be in the beginning of the millennium. So what to you constitutes a culture of peace? How do you know you're in one?
Again, there's a culture of peace is at personal level,
Yes.
and at the bigger level.
Yes.
And at the personal level, it's very important. In old days, not old days, but it was a previous time we used to use a term called "he's very cultured." Huh? We don't use you don't hear that term.
You don't hear that anymore. Yes.
And that meant you were very polite, formal. You knew the etiquettes of how to interact in the society, and the culture that way is a very important word there. And so, in personal terms, when do we become cultured? That's the question I always ask myself, and I think the real culture of peace, the test is when we start seeing other person as not other. When we start seeing that you are the same as I am, because you have the same goodness in you as I have.
Yeah.
or you, you know, if you're a bit spiritual, then I will say you have the same divinity in you, which I have, and that transcends gender, religions, nationality. So that at the personal level, that's a very important to strive towards that, being that cultured.
Yes, yes.
But at the bigger level there, we are talking about, you know, United
culture.
Nations, the
Yes.
culture of peace, the package which we put together, and I'm saying we because Anna Kuzma is with me on that as a part of the Canadian Peace Initiative, the concept of a Department of Peace.
Yes, and I like that idea very much. Yes.
And if you look at the essential components of that, it's like a bouquet there of a culture of peace. It has got 5 pillars. And these are 5 pillars would be, you know, our peace education, you know, peace education, human and economic rights,
Yes.
Disarmament, nuclear disarmament, building of a peace specialist corps comprising of specialists who are who specialize in prevention, mediation, and reconciliation of conflicts. And these people could be deployed in international conflict situations as well as at home.
Okay.
And within the home, the 5th element is how to prevent conflict when we are talking about violence against women and children,
Yes.
violence with the reconciliation with the First Nations,
Yes.
all the domestic
Kind of
agenda,
more global.
youth,
Yes.
you know. So that,
Okay.
that if you have all those elements together,
Yes.
you're going to have a culture of peace.
Okay.
And that's what we have been proposing in the Department of Peace concept.
Got it. And so a lot of what we're talking about here, it really touches on the idea of values, because you keep coming back to a lot of your personal, you know, how the person is acting in relationship to peace. And so what are some of the core values that you think are the important elements of peace? And is there an example maybe that you can give me of that?
Well, I would say love is
Love.
the core value of
Yes.
that. Respect for another person, that there is equality basis on everybody here. And these are important. That there's cooperation between people.
Yes.
That we should, and if we disagree, well, we come to some kind of reconciliation, and we talk about it. So this is important, that these are the core values. Love is central, though.
Yes, and I appreciate that. I know from the Dukabor philosophy especially, it is something that is absolutely key, because it's the belief that we are essentially love. We are gods here on this earth, and we are here to express that divine in everything that we do. And I know that you are a student, a great student of Gandhi, and a lot of his teachings as well focus on, well, be the peace that you wish to see in the world. It all begins from within outwards. And you know, I do believe, we have to go to break in about 2 minutes, but I want to begin the conversation around, I think for many people, I really do believe, especially in this country, want to feel like they are contributing to a social good, that they are doing something to make the world and their communities a better place. And sometimes it's easy to feel overwhelmed with all the things that you see, and you might think, gosh, I'm just one person. What can one person do? You know, what can you say to somebody to begin that process of working towards that culture of peace, the small steps, the baby steps?
Oh, I mean, you can start learning. You could listen to people. Very important.
Listening.
Listening is first
Yeah.
step. Do your homework. Look around for good information.
Yes.
It seems if the local media is not too balanced, you can look elsewhere around the world, and we
Yes.
have good examples
Yeah.
of good alternative media today.
Yes.
Places like RT, the Common Dreams.
Yes.
In the States. You have Clearinghouse, International Clearinghouse.
Okay.
These are good alternative views of what the world looks like. So we need to become educated,
Yes.
so as to be able to make good judgments.
Okay.
So
I wanna-
listening is
Listening.
important.
Okay. Well, we'll hold that thought for a moment. We do have to go to break. Please stay tuned, everyone, as we continue our conversation on building a culture of peace. We'll be right back.